Welcome to the Membership Guys podcast. Kick-ass advice and tips for membership site owners.
Well, hello there. Welcome to episode 163 of the Membership Guys podcast with me, Mike Morrison, your host for the best darn podcast for membership site owners around. This is the place to be for everything you need to grow a successful membership business. Today, we're talking about podcasting. A few weeks ago, I was over in Philadelphia, over in the United States, for an event called Podcast Movement. This is a yearly conference which attracts thousands of podcasters from pretty much every market, every industry, every niche imaginable, together in a hotel for a few days, learning all about podcasting strategy, tech, marketing, all of that sort of stuff. It's one of my favorite events to go to. I don't know what it is. Something about the vibe, something about the people. It's just a great event. It also moves around in the US quite a lot. It's never in the same location. So it's kind of my de facto way of touring the United States and going to cities that I wouldn't necessarily go to otherwise. So this year was absolutely awesome as usual. I had a chance to not only catch up with some good friends and some peers in the industry, but also to meet a lot of you guys. Without doubt, one of the biggest highlights of my trip this year, and indeed every year I've been to this event, is meeting people who listen to the podcast, who are part of our Facebook group, and of course our members from membersiteacademy.com. So if you came over and you said hello, if we chatted, thanks so much for doing that. I love that part of things. It makes going to these events so awesome. Now, I digress. This isn't what this episode's about. It's not just me raving about how much of a good time I had at this event. What I wanted to talk about today is inspired by Podcast Movement and by all this talk about how to use a podcast to promote and grow your business. I want today's episode to focus in on some of the ways that you can use a podcast, whether you're already podcasting and you're just looking for ways to make it a little more strategic, or whether you're still trying to figure out your content strategy and you're wondering whether you should consider podcasting and how you might use that to promote your membership. Today, I'm going to go through some specific ways that a membership owner can use podcasting to help grow their business. So the first way to use a podcast to promote your membership is to be your own sponsor. Now, one of the main ways that people monetize their podcast is with sponsorships, where at 2 or 3 points in their show, depending on how long each episode is, there'll be a 30 to 60 second long ad. Usually it's a podcast host reading out a script in which they're plugging a sponsor's product. But if you run a membership site, rather than using a podcast to promote somebody else's stuff, instead use your podcast to promote your membership. Then you're essentially acting as your own sponsor rather than plugging other companies. Now, it's worth bearing in mind if you're still in the early stages of podcasting or you're considering podcasting, that sponsors are usually only interested in shows that are getting hundreds of thousands of downloads a year. Now, that's not always the case, and indeed there's a lot of very successful niche podcasts that attract sponsors who are very, very highly targeted, but usually it's more about volume. And of course, that makes sense. You know, if somebody's paying to have their ad on a show, they want that ad to reach as many people as possible. Now, Libsyn, which is one of the biggest podcast hosting companies in the world, it's who we host both the Membership Guys podcast and the Behind the Membership podcast with. They've released data that claims that 5,000 downloads per episode within a 30 to 45 day period is kind of the ballpark range that most advertisers are looking for when it comes to deciding which shows they want to sponsor and run their ads on. Now, again, according to Libsyn, only 10.5% of all podcasts hosted on their service. And again, keep in mind, Libsyn are probably one of the biggest hosts, if not the biggest podcast host. And they have a lot of big name, high profile shows on their hosting platform. So only 10.5% of those receive that 5,000 download or more figure for episodes within a 30 to 45 day period. So that's quite a small amount of podcasts out there that actually reach the threshold that most companies will look for when they're considering sponsorship. Now, when we crunch some numbers with Midroll, who are a podcast advertising network, they help people arrange and manage these sponsorships. We crunch a little bit of data with them to get an idea of how much you would be likely to earn in sponsorship revenue if you were getting 5,000 downloads per episode. Now, based on their calculations and the data they give, for 5,000 downloads per episode, if you were showing one ad per podcast episode you released, and if you were putting out an episode every single week, so that's 52 episodes a year, that would bring in around about $1,500 to $3,500 per year. Now, that might sound nice to you if you're in that early stage, if you're right at the beginning of your journey. An extra couple of $1,000s may sound pretty cool, but in honesty, that's not a lot of money for that level of popularity. If your show's getting 5,000 downloads per episode, you should be making more than just a couple of grand a year. It really isn't that much money for that level of popularity for your podcast. You could do so much more just using your show to promote your membership site. Think of how many sales you could generate for your membership with those download numbers. So that's the first way in which you could use a podcast to promote your membership. Be your own sponsor. Don't prioritize the promotion of other people's products, other people's companies over your own. Make everything, any sort of ads, any promos you do in your podcast should be directing people to your membership website. The second way of using a podcast to promote your membership is to work in organic plugs for your membership site into the actual episode content. Now, what we were talking about before is having actual ads. So something where anybody listening will recognize it as a plug, a promo. Now, you don't want to be ramming that in at every opportunity. Nobody likes listening to a 15-minute long sales pitch. But by the very nature of what you're going to be talking about on your podcast and the fact that it's going to be directly related to the same sort of topic, the same sort of info that you're going to be covering in your membership, then there's a lot of opportunities to speak about your membership in a very organic way. So if you think about this show, this podcast, every week we tackle a specific topic that is aimed around helping you to learn a tactic, solve a problem, answer a question, or what have you. If you're going down the same route with your podcast, then you can frame those topics in the context of your membership. So when you're introducing your show and you're setting up the main content of the show, you can say things like, this is a question one of our members asked. This is a topic that comes up all of the time inside our community. This is a strategy that we know is working very well for one of our members. So that kind of preface, that framing device, allows you to very naturally, very organically bring your membership into the equation. That doesn't mean that once you raise the topic of your membership, you don't say, this is a topic one of our members asked. And by the way, when I say one of our members, I mean one of the members over at membersiteacademy.com. Why not head along and check it out? That's not how you're doing it. It needs to be conversational. It needs to be organic. So let's take a quick example from our own podcast. Several weeks ago, I did an episode about refund policies, how to respond when somebody asks for a refund. So the content of that episode is a response to that question. How do I handle refunds? Now, I don't remember if I actually provided this as the preface, but it's a very natural, very obvious way of doing it. For that kind of topic, all you simply do is say, this is something that people have been asking a lot inside our forum. If someone asks for their money back, what do I do? Well, my advice is this. So you don't need to go any further than that, but just mentioning your membership site and framing your episode in that context, it helps keep your membership top of mind. It helps raise awareness, because if someone's tuning in for the very first time, they don't know you've got a membership yet, you're bringing it to their attention, even in just a subtle way, so that later on, when they hear an ad or they hear a promo for the membership, it makes sense. You can also work in mentions of related content as well into the episode. So again, using that example of the refund policy episode that we did on this show, I could work into that. And this is something that we dive into in more detail inside our member lifecycle course within membersiteacademy.com. Again, I don't need to drill into that anymore, but if you're covering just a tiny little bit of a wider topic, and you know that actually if somebody did want to delve further into other branching subjects and stuff like that, if you've got content for that inside your membership, then again, you mention it there. You know, if you're talking about a subject that you've got an expert that's come into your membership that has done a workshop on that, you can kind of say, and, you know, this is something that Joe Bloggs talked about a lot when he recently came in and delivered a workshop for our members. Those little mentions, those organic plugs for your membership work like gangbusters. And of course, anytime you do have content in your membership that's related to what you're talking about in your podcast, make sure that you list this and link this on your show notes page if you're publishing your podcast on your main website, your blog, or what have you too. So that's the second way. Work in organic plugs for your membership. Make your membership the context, the framing device for the topics you're talking about on your podcast. Third way of using the podcast to promote your membership is to repurpose audio from your membership content. If you've got a course that consists of 20 lessons, it's not going to diminish the value of that course. If you pull out 3 of those lessons, strip the audio, and put that audio out there as 3 separate podcast episodes. You know, as long as that lesson has some standalone value, then take it out of the context of the course, turn it into a podcast episode, and just mention to people, this is a sample of whatever the course is. This is a taste of what you get inside the membership. Normally, this is only available for paying members, but to thank you for listening to the podcast, this week I'm giving you something very special. Again, raises awareness, but it's also going to whet their appetites. So if they do want to dig deeper, you've got that organic next step. You know, you've just had 1/20th of this huge, awesome course. If you like what you heard, join the membership and you get the rest of the meal. You can also do this if you're doing like live Q&As or coaching calls or office hours or anything where you're interacting with your members live. They're asking you questions, or perhaps you're doing something interactive with them on the call, like a coaching call or something like that. You can take little samples of that and turn those into podcast episodes. It could be a regular thing. So we do 2 live monthly Q&As every month inside Memberside Academy. During those shows, they're usually about 50 minutes to an hour long. We answer any questions that are fired to us about memberships. So we'll usually answer at least 8 to 10 questions before we either run out of time or people run out of questions. Now, we could so easily cut together, out of the 2 live Q&As we do every month, we can so easily cut together 3 or 4 of the questions that we answer, package them up into a podcast episode, and again, that's a sample of the type of questions, the type of advice, the type of interaction you get with us every month inside our membership. It's not diminishing the value of that for our paying members, so our paying members aren't going to feel cheated by the fact that we've taken the recordings of those live Q&As, because the recording of it isn't where the value is. The real value for those members is the fact that they can turn up and interact with us in real time, or they can do coaching calls if you're doing coaching calls in your membership. That's where the value is. And even for people who would be a little bit put out of place by the fact you were giving away recordings or samples of those, if you're just taking a little bit, if you're taking 3 or 4 questions from a Q&A session in which you answered 20 questions, it's not diminishing the value. You're not giving away the entirety of something that they paid for. So look for any opportunities in your membership content to grab a little sample, put it out there as part of your free content strategy to, once more, raise awareness of the fact that membership exists and to provide a taster or a sample that gives you the context to be able to then plug your membership in a more targeted, direct way. 4th way of using your podcast to promote your membership is to have a podcast listener promotion. So this is where you have some sort of special offer, a discount, or a trial that you only offer to listeners of your podcast. Now, when it comes to memberships, it can get a little bit dicey if you're giving money off and stuff like that, because, you know, not everyone's going to listen to your podcast. And if someone finds out that they're paying half as much as somebody else for exactly the same stuff, and you joined at the same time, or even worse, the person getting the big discount joined after you did, you're not going to be happy with that. But you can play around with different promotional ideas. You can do things like giving people 2 months for the price of 1, which is essentially just a 30-day trial packaged up and promoted in a different way. You can offer bonuses. You can offer 13 months for the price of 12. Or if you don't normally have a free trial available, you can offer that just to podcast listeners. So this is something that you're using as a very specifically targeted promo to anyone who listens to your podcast. And usually you'll direct people to a specific special URL. That again reminds them of the fact that they're getting this as a thank you for being a podcast listener. So it would be something like yourwebsite.com/podcast or podcast trial or something like that. Again, the fact that this promotion is only available for podcast listeners gives a little bit more of a justification for you talking about it on your show, because you're not just throwing out a generic promo. You're telling people about something that is very specific to them, because they're the only guys who are getting it. Now, typically with these kind of promotions, you don't want to make it time limited. Remember, your podcast is going to be evergreen content. Somebody who discovers your podcast today could very well binge listen to the entire back catalogue spanning back years. You don't want to cause confusion if you're offering promotions or offers that are only available for a week or two, because, okay, it's going to make sense from the week or two from when you first release a podcast, but someone listening to that episode 2 years down the line, they're going to get excited and think, oh, cool, I'm going to go and get that promo, I'm going to go and get that offer, and then they find out, oh, no, wait. It expired 3 years ago. So don't make them timely, but do make them specific to your podcast listeners. And again, frame this as something you're doing for these guys. It's a thank you for the fact that they subscribe to your podcast. The fifth way in which you can use a podcast to promote your membership is to find opportunities to feature your actual members on your show. So what you'll typically find is your membership will attract other experts, people who have their own unique knowledge or experience to share. Now, these might be respected authorities within their own fields. So again, with membersiteacademy.com, we have a whole bunch of well-known experts and influencers from a variety of different fields who are in there. There's a nice cross-section. And so we've had some of those experts on this show as authorities, as influencers, because we've got experts on podcasting, we've got experts on productivity and virtual assistants and live video and all that sort of stuff. So if you've got a typical interview type show where you usually feature experts, then if those experts also happen to be your members, get them on the show. Because actually what happens is when you're introducing these guys and you actually mention these people are part of my membership, that makes your membership look pretty awesome. Not only is someone going to get access to you as an authority and an expert and an influencer, but also they're going to be swimming in the same pool as all of these other awesome experts. Now, that's obviously going to be very dependent on the type of topic you have, the type of membership that you've got. But even if you don't have these experts and influencers in your community, you should still look for opportunities to bring your members onto your show to talk about their journey, talk about their story. Now, a lot of you listening to this will also listen to our other podcast, Behind the Membership, which is actually hosted by the other membership guy, Callie Willows, my partner in crime, and anyone who knows us would say the real brains of the operation. And that show features interviews with membership site owners in a variety of different markets who have a wide range of different stories to share. Now, these guys aren't all well-known experts and influencers. They're not all mega successful membership owners. In fact, we've had people on there specifically to share stories of when things haven't quite gone too well. But what that does, every episode essentially creates a case study. And it just so happens that every single person on the Behind the Membership podcast happens to be a member of membersiteacademy.com as well. So in a lot of cases, our membership gets mentioned, again, very organically. Not in a salesy way, not in a pitchy way. It just comes up because it's a part of the journeys, it's a part of the stories of the people that we're talking to. So you might consider doing that. Also, if you know that there's people in your membership who are using your membership very well, they are applying tactics and strategies and things that you're teaching them, then get those on the show to talk specifically about how they've used a particular technique, how they've got great results from applying what they've been taught. This is the teacher's pet approach. Always be on the lookout for anyone in your membership who fits that kind of mold, who you can bring on to essentially provide that social proof that what you're teaching works. So those sorts of interviews and case studies are a great way of featuring members on your show. We also talked about coaching calls before. If you do one-on-one coaching calls as part of your membership, then again, consider whether or not you might want to take one of those calls every month and put the audio out as a public podcast episode. With that, you're certainly going to want to get permission from the person that you're coaching, but as long as you've got that buttoned up, it's not only a great way of putting out content that once again organically brings your membership into the conversation, but it's also a good way of giving a sample of what members get, and it doesn't diminish the value of the membership because the real value is had by that member through the fact that you're enabling them to interact with you one-on-one. Something else you could consider doing is enabling your members to submit questions specifically for you to cover on your membership. Pat Flynn, who is very, very well known in the podcasting space, has a quite well-known side series. So he's got his main podcast, but he also does something called Ask Pat, which I believe he originally transitioned into being a video series. But essentially what that is he enables people to record a little question. He uses a tool called SpeakPipe, or certainly he used to use a tool called SpeakPipe, which allows people to record short audio messages. And then he uses those on his podcast. So he'll play that audio first of someone asking that question, and then he records his answer. You could do that, but you could limit the ability to submit those questions to just your members. You might reward them if their questions are featured, either by giving them a little bit of a plug, a shout out, promoting their membership site, or you can go one further. Again, we talked about Pat with his Ask Pat series. He used to send, and I believe he may still do this, a t-shirt branded with the Ask Pat logo to anyone whose question was featured on the show. Not only is this a little bit of an easy button for topic generation and giving you ideas for your podcast episode content, but also, once again, it means you can say, this question comes in from John, one of our members at Membersite Academy. He runs a fantastic membership called whatever.com, and his question is this. Again, you're mentioning your membership without it being a direct plug or a sales pitch. And then the final tip for how to use a podcast to promote your membership is to look for opportunities to provide member-only bonus content. So this is bonus content related to your podcast that is only available for your members. So let's take as an example this episode. What we could do is actually create a worksheet or a checklist in which we run through the 6 different strategies for promoting your membership with a podcast, and maybe we give some bonus advice and we give some links and some resources, package it all up into a PDF and make that only available to our members. If we were doing that, we would of course say on this episode, well, if you want to get this bonus, you need to become a member of Membersite Academy. As it happens, that's not something that we're doing for various reasons, but it just is an example of how easily you could spin off a downloadable resource, a checklist, a template file, scripts that you could use. If you're doing a marketing podcast and you're talking about the essential emails that you need to send to your list, you can actually write up some swipe files. So you could write out some content for emails that you then make available just to your members. And then tell listeners of your podcast, if you happen to be a member of my membership, then make sure you look out for our email swipe files in which we give you copy and paste content for all the emails we've just talked about. Any opportunity you have to create bonus downloads and resources to give you that kind of member-only bonus content, that helps you to highlight that there is a difference between paying members and non-members. And that the way that somebody gets the real good stuff, gets the absolute best from you, is to be a paying member. Now, this is a strategy we implemented for ScottsBassLessons.com. So Scott's Bass Lessons have a podcast that features interviews with bass guitar players. That everybody, whether they're a member or not, can subscribe to the podcast. But those interviews actually start out as video interviews. So the podcast is the audio from those videos. Everyone can subscribe to that, but only the members get the video recording. It's the same interview. Now, there's not enough value in that to justify becoming a member, but what it does do is it brings the membership into the conversation. It gives Scott a reason to talk about the membership, and it highlights that there's a difference between non-members and members. This is just one tiny little perk, tiny little way in which a paying member gets more than you get as a non-paying member. That sort of stuff is going to send people off down the rabbit hole to see what else is reserved for paying members. So it can be video recordings of interviews. It could actually be early access to your podcast. So you might let your paying members download each episode of your podcast a week before it comes out live. Again, it's just a little bit of a perk, a little bit of exclusivity, a little bit of priority preferential treatment for your members. Again, it can be as simple as downloads, resources, templates, checklists directly related to the topic of the episode. You might even think about doing after hours bonus material. Now, what I mean by this is, let's say you're interviewing an expert on your show, you might record an additional 10 minutes of material that doesn't go out there publicly, and that you only make available to your members. So you could post the extended version of your podcast episode inside your membership. Maybe it's something where you have a 10 question format or 5 questions that you ask every single person who comes on your show at the end of the main interview. And you keep that 5 question segment just for your members, and you brand it up. You can call it After Hours, the Membership Guys After Hours, the Membership Guys Extra Time, that sort of thing. If you think about a plain old DVD or Blu-ray or whatever, and then you think about the extended edition, your members should get the extended edition. The public get the regular movie. They get the movie, they get the main thing, but all those extra features, the director's commentaries, the behind-the-scenes stuff, the bonuses, they're reserved for your paying members. So lots of ideas there about how you can leverage a podcast to promote your membership and drive member sales. Number 1, be your own sponsor. Don't start a membership with the idea that you're going to make it huge and then wait for someone to come along and offer to pay you to run their ads. If you've got a membership product, be your own sponsor. Leverage the opportunity you have and the platform your podcast gives you to drive people to your membership instead of plugging other people's stuff. Number 2, always work in organic mentions of your membership. Use it as the setup, the premise, the framing device for whatever you're talking about in your podcast episodes. Number 3, find ways to repurpose audio from your membership content. It doesn't diminish the value of what's in there for your membership if you take a little sample of that and put it out there on your public podcast as a bit of a taster, a bit of a teaser. Number 4, offer a podcast listener specific promotion. So some sort of discount, offer, or trial that is only offered to listeners of your podcast. Number 5, find opportunities to feature members on your show. Just by nature of the fact that they're a member means that your membership will be brought up in conversation. It'll be talked about in a very organic way, and the social proof that can come with that is worth its weight in gold. And finally, find opportunities to create member-only bonus content. Your podcast listeners get the regular edition. Your members get the extended special edition with all the extra features and all the bonus stuff. So hopefully this has given you a little bit of food for thought if you're a podcaster and you're not quite sure whether or not you're getting the most out of your podcast in terms of a promotional tool for your membership, or if you're trying to figure out your content strategy or whether you should consider starting a podcast. This is going to give you a bit of a head start and help you to ensure that your podcast becomes a huge part of your membership marketing strategy. That's it from me for this week. I really do hope you found this week's episode useful. As always, I'd love to hear from you. If you have a particular strategy or particular way you're using your podcast to drive sales, either for your membership or for other products you offer, courses or whatever, or maybe rather than using your podcast to promote your membership, you're using it to send people to a Facebook group or to an email opt-in or something like that. I want to hear from you guys. Let me know inside our free Facebook group over at talkmemberships.com. Punch that into your browser, it'll take you to our group. Or if you're on Facebook, if you're on the app, search for Membership Mastermind, and that'll take you to our group. We've got 9,000 plus membership site owners in there. We're talking memberships day in, day out. Let me know in that group what you've thought of this week's episodes and whether you've got any tips and advice or stories to share about how you're using a podcast to promote your membership. Or, you know what? If you joined our membership, membersiteacademy.com, as a result of listening to the podcast, I want to hear from you as well. That'll be real interesting. Post inside the free Facebook group and let us know. That's it from me for this week. I truly, truly appreciate each and every one of you for hanging out with me and spending a little bit of your day with me. I hope it's been worth your while. I'll be back again next week with another installment of the Membership Guys podcast. If you've enjoyed today's episode of the Membership Guys podcast, we invite you to check out the membersiteacademy.com. The Membersite Academy is the essential resource for anyone at any stage of starting, growing, and running a membership website. So whether you're still figuring out what your idea is going to be, or whether your website is already up and running and you're just looking for ways to grow it and attract new members, then the Membersite Academy can help you to get to the next level. With our extensive course library, monthly training, exclusive member-only discounts, perks and tools, and a supportive, active community to help you along the way with feedback, encouragement and advice, the Membersite Academy is the perfect place to be for anyone looking to start, manage and grow a successful membership website. So check it out at membersiteacademy.com.